Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Attitude Experts webinar. We apologize for being a few minutes late. We were having a minor technical problem, but we are ready and set to go. Today's session, Screen Time Limits and Transitions, and our expert today is Randy Kulman from Learning Works for Kids. And Randy will be giving a quick introduction to the session, and then he will be presenting for his slides for the first roughly half hour, and then the second half of the session will be devoted to questions. For anyone who has not been attended an Attitude webinar before, you are all muted. You enter your questions in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will be organizing and asking as many questions as you can. If you have trouble hearing the webinar, it is most likely a connection problem on your end, and there are two solutions that we can suggest. If you have the opportunity to switch to the phone, on the right-hand side, you will see there's a button where you can click telephone, and it will give you a telephone number and a code number to call in. Your other option, if a telephone is not an option, would be to just sign out and sign back in again, as that usually fixes the problem. A copy of today's slides are available as a handout also on the right-hand side of your screen. You should see right either above or below your question box a thing that says handouts, and you can download the PDF of the slides. With that said, let me turn it over to Randy, who will tell you just a little bit about himself, and we'll get started. Thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Stuart, for having me. I really appreciate the folks at Attitude Magazine inviting me to speak today. So I'm hoping to have an opportunity to talk to everybody about some very practical kinds of things that we would like to have them come away with around using screen time with kids with ADHD, and particularly around doing homework. What I'd like to do is just tell you a little about myself and how I got to this area. I am a child neuropsychologist, been working with kids with ADHD for about 30 years as the clinical director at South County Child and Family Consultants. You can see our website up there. And by the way, that's a great website for parents of ADHD, full of information around books to read, videos to watch to help not only kids with ADHD but autism spectrum disorders and executive functioning issues. I encourage you to go there. Everything is totally free, a lot of PDFs that you can print out. And so in my work as a psychologist, I've seen lots of kids who love technology, kids with ADHD who just seem to flourish when they're in front of a screen. They love it. They get engaged with it. Many of the parents will tell me things like, oh, my kid couldn't have ADHD. You should see him play a video game. So I got really interested in what that was all about, and at the same time began to look into how kids might be using a number of executive functioning skills when they were playing video games or using other technologies. As a result of that, I wrote a couple of books. You can see those up there. Train Your Brain for Success, A Teenager's Guide to Executive Functions, which is really directed at teenagers who want to improve their executive functioning skills. And Playing Smarter in a Digital World is really focused more on the topics that we'll be talking about today around screen time and how to make it healthy for kids. Then what happened is, over the course of time, I began to realize that parents didn't know too much about this, neither did educators or clinicians, so we developed the Learning Works for Kids website. And the Learning Works for Kids website is an incredible website. There's probably 1,000 games and apps that we not only describe and tell you how they might be good for improving particular executive functioning skills, but we tell you how to use those. The Learning Works for Kids website has probably 5,000 free pages for parents. We've also recently introduced a premium membership, which I would encourage you to explore and look at. In that premium membership, there are actually games for your kids to play where we can actually help those kids understand the executive skills they're using in games and help them apply those same skills in the real world. The premium website also includes a number of Minecraft Let's Play videos and other Let's Play videos. If you've got a kid who likes video games, they're probably spending a lot of time on YouTube watching Let's Plays. Our Let's Plays are just like those, except that we're actually trying to teach the kid how they might be using skills like organization, planning, cognitive flexibility, memory, while they're playing Minecraft and other popular games like Portal 2. So we're really trying to get kids to think about the skills that they're using with technology and not see it as simply a waste of time. By the way, I would just love it if you would go follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. You know, check out the stuff that we've got. You'll find there's a lot of great information for kids. So, why would kids rather play Minecraft than do homework? Well, that's pretty simple. Okay, why would you rather come home from work and relax rather than go do some more work? But you know, it's a pretty simple issue here. I think what happens is that games are really engaging. We call it engagement. That is, kids are really immersed in their gameplay in a cognitively positive fashion. Games are multimodal. They really attract kids. They grab their attention. In fact, one of the things that I've noticed in talking with parents of kids with ADHD is that one of the reasons they let the kids play games, and sometimes play their games too much, so the kids seem to be happy when they're playing games. They're content. They're engaged. They're not switching from one thing to another, complaining about being bored. They seem to be intent. They show the kinds of executive skills we'd like to see them show in other places, knowing how to get initiated on a task, being persistent, sustaining their focus when they're involved in gameplay. So that's a really important reason why kids want to do this kind of stuff. Another aspect of this is that you know, when kids are doing things that they like to do, kids with ADHD, even something like playing Legos, they are engaged, they love doing it, and they stick with it. The other part that I think we need to take a look at is some of the homework that we're giving to kids with ADHD may not be appropriate. Sometimes they're getting too much homework. Sometimes they're spending all of their time outside of school doing their homework, and it's really a real problem for the kids who may have some processing speed issues as well. So, should gameplay, watching TV, using social media come before homework? Well, not really. We should really try to get the kids to do their homework first, but that's not always realistic. I mean, sometimes in today's world, you know, kids need their parents to work with them. Teenagers need to connect with their friends. They haven't been able to do that, and they're busy using social media. They're coming home from school, and instead of what they used to do, instead of going over to a friend's house, now they sit in their basement or in their living room in front of their console and play Call of Duty with their friends. Or they connect with their friends playing Minecraft. So it's really a way that technology gives kids to communicate with each other that they haven't had before. There's a lot of other reasons that kids end up spending time with digital media before they do their homework. Sometimes parents are just not available. Two parents are working. The parents may be tired when the kids come home. There are a lot of issues that go on. If I could design an ideal strategy for many kids, not all kids, but many kids with ADHD after school in terms of getting their homework done, it would be that they got outside. We have great data that says that being outdoors is a very positive thing for kids with ADHD. Kids with ADHD need to be outside. It changes their brain chemistry. And kids with ADHD need to exercise. And they need to exercise vigorously or with complex body movements. So recommendations include things like rock climbing, swimming, playing tennis, karate. Those kinds of activities increase the amount of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You see it on the screen, BDNF. BDNF increases the capacity to pay attention, to learn, and it sort of primes the brain to be able to do homework. Now, if your kid really loves to play video games and you want to find a way to use video games as a tool to get them to play homework, one of the things I might suggest is games. Those games like the We Play games, the We Fit games, the games where kids are actually moving. Because, again, those games have been demonstrated to actually enhance executive functions and, again, can increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now, it's very hard for a lot of kids to transition from games to homework. kids with ADHD, kids with autism spectrum disorders, kids with learning disabilities struggle with transitions to begin with. Sandbox games like Minecraft are particularly difficult. What happens with those kinds of sandbox games is there's not a real beginning or an end, so kids can, it's like, you can't just say, well, get to the next level and stop. Well, there's no next level. If the kids leave the game, they're afraid something's going to happen. So there's a lot of reasons that transitioning from these kinds of games is particularly difficult. So what do you do? How do you best help kids to be able to transition from games to homework, or for that matter, to doing something else? I mean, a lot of times it's transitioning from a game to having dinner, or transitioning from playing a game to getting ready for bed. So it's not just for doing homework. Well, the best advice I can give you is start early. But if you haven't started early, you've got to kind of figure out some other things. If you can start early and you have some real clear methods of doing this with your kids, it's going to be much easier for you to do. But you want to be able to develop reasonable rules and limits in advance so the kid knows what the limits are. You want to reward when they follow through with that, and you also want to be able to impose consequences when they don't. You may need to be able to control access to the internet so that you can just simply stop the games themselves when they're being played. And you'll note on the bottom of the slide, and you'll see this on a few different slides, we created a page on the Learning Works for Kids website, learningworksforkids.com/attitude, that has a series of articles on a number of these topics with very specific recommendations for you about how to do each of these things that we're talking about. So there's only so much that I can talk about today during the webinar, but you're going to be able to find dozens of articles and specific strategies about what you can do by using that link. Now, one other thing I would say to you about this is that one of the reasons it's so difficult to transition from games to homework or to so many activities is what we as adults experience as well. Technology is incredibly engaging. People have shorter attention spans than they have in the past. They're looking for excitement. And games are like that. Games are happening very quickly. They change. There's engagement that's not there in other ways. I find myself, I'm a New England Patriots fan. I don't know if I'm going to turn off anybody by telling you that, okay? But I find myself sometimes watching what's called the Red Zone. It's an NFL television show that basically shows the highlights one after another, and it's incredibly fast-paced. And sometimes when you go from that even back to the football game, which is pretty exciting to begin with, at least for me, it seems really slow. So that's what our kids are growing up with. They're growing up in an environment where things are moving so fast that homework, and for that matter, teachers, seem to be mundane and uninteresting compared to the technology and the videos and the games that they're playing. So what should you consider when you think about when homework should be done for kids with ADHD? So the first thing is you need to consider the kid's age. Kids need to play, particularly younger kids. Okay, to me it's appalling when kindergarten students and first and second grade students are coming home with a half an hour of homework. I just think that those kids need to play. We know that play equals learning. For kids, that's how they learn the most. There's no question about that. We know that just teaching academics alone is oftentimes insufficient for really learning academics. So, for example, there's some great data that says that if we can teach kids executive functioning skills by playing games where they have to start and stop, that they'll actually get better at reading and math in later elementary school than if we spent that same time teaching them reading and math skills. So kids need to play. They need to have other activities. They need breaks. Now, for some kids with ADHD, we need to consider special issues. So if you have a child who's taking medication for ADHD, if that medication is working at 3 o'clock when they return home, but it stops working at 4:30, then you want to get that homework done right then and there. The child's going to do it much more efficiently. They'll probably be happier doing it. You want to get that done before they might have any kind of rebound effect, because that might be the worst time for them to do their homework. But you also have to ask some other questions. Can they do it on their own? Okay, do they have the executive skills like organization, task initiation, time management to do those things on their own? If they don't, then they need to do it when you're available or when there's someone there to help them. So it's not a simple. There's not a simple solution for this. And while many parents would like to just have the kids do their homework right after school, it doesn't fit for everyone. It fits pretty well for the kids taking meds, kids who might really fight transitions, who really struggle with that greatly, or if parents are right there and have the energy to take care of that right at that time. But again, I am a big advocate of kids playing and being outdoors. I'm a Rhode Islander. By the way, you might have heard my accent here. If I said car or things like that, you'll know why you're hearing it like that. But in Rhode Island in the winter, we have a very short amount of time between the end of elementary school day and when it gets dark. So kids need to get outside then. So if possible, because we know that that's good for kids with ADHD. So getting their homework is done is good, but also being outdoors and running around is good. And I think we have to really take a look at that. Okay, I do think that for most kids, before they spend screen time, homework should get done. Now, I think that screen time, it should not simply be used as a reward, but if that's what the kid is looking forward to, you can use it as a tool like that. I mean, if I had my druthers, you see here again, I'm focusing on this idea about exercise. It's a great strategy for kids with ADHD. Exercise, vigorous exercise, even doing something like yoga can be very helpful for kids. Doing those kinds of things, walking home from school. I mean, that's a great thing. If your child can ride their bike home from school, it gets them some exercise, it gives them something to do. It might, again, prime them for doing their schoolwork. So for some kids, and this slide is really probably designed for older kids. How do we think about keeping technology sort of outside of their reach? Well, the best strategies, if you will, is to kind of have the kid engage in this. Now, I would say this, that you really need to, again, look at each child individually. If your child's doing well in school, they're getting their homework done, and they figured out a way to do it, it's not a problem, whatever they do. If they're sitting at their computer doing their homework and they've got their cell phone next to them and they're checking their Instagram feed and they're getting all A's, I wouldn't be very concerned, even if they could maybe get their homework done much more efficiently if they didn't have that kind of thing. On the other hand, if that's a problem, what you really want to do is you want to get the kid to engage with you. You want them to share these issues with you. If you can get them to buy into it. I've had a lot of kids that I've worked with, more tweens and teens, who voluntarily give up their cell phone to their parents for half an hour at a time. And then they come back to it. Or another strategy is that if they're doing their homework on the computer, that they have a browser, specific browser that has blocked sites. So let's say you typically use Firefox, well then create a Chrome browser that locks out everything else other than their homework. Putting their phones on airplane mode to block notifications. You can do all kinds of things like this. There are a lot of other strategies. If these things don't work, you need to try closer monitoring. You need to have the kids have the computer or do their schoolwork in a room where you can monitor that. If these kinds of strategies don't work, then at some point you probably need to impose some parental controls that go outside of the kid. And when that happens, the kids are not necessarily going to be very happy about that. So another question we ask is, can these games and apps and technologies help kids with ADHD with their homework? So one of the things, if you go to our Learning Works for Kids website, in addition to the attitude page here, is even on our homepage today, one of the things we put up is a number of great homework sites, places where your kids can learn all kinds of stuff just going onto those sites. And they may get lost in those sites, but they're also going to be doing a whole bunch of educational kinds of things. But the reality is that we know now that digital media can really help kids in a lot of ways. Think about the creativity that kids are using when they're making YouTube videos. It's incredible. They have to use planning and organizational skills as well. What we see is a lot of great apps that can support executive functioning skills. So there's some great apps for organization and planning like My Homework, Evernote. There's some terrific apps such as Elevate that are helpful for working memory skills. Again, you can see all these kinds of things on the Learning Works for Kids website. So you can see what they do and which kids would be helpful for those with those tools. But there's other kinds of ideas that you can use. Kids can listen to ebooks while they're walking or exercising. Technology is great for struggling readers. One of the best recommendations I ever made to a family was I suggested to an 11-year-old boy with ADHD who did not like to read. He could read, but he struggled with reading. He was an okay reader, but he spent so much of his resources reading that he wasn't comprehending. He had to do summertime reading. I said, why don't you get WhisperSync? It's a tool through Amazon.com where it combines an ebook with the audiobook, and it links it up, so it highlights the words. So the child was reading the words as he was listening to the books. His parents came in and said that was incredible. He loved reading. He wanted to do more. When they asked him about what he read and he had to do it and go write his reports, it was like a breeze for him. He just loved it. So technology offers a lot of opportunities. And we're also seeing that technology changes the brain. For example, there was a study of Super Mario 64 that by Kuhn that suggested that it builds different brain images, brain regions. Tetris actually increases the thickness of the cerebral cortex. Kids playing Rayman Raving Rabbit, an old kind of party game that kids play, who played that can improve their reading fluency far more than kids who spent the same amount of time in a reading fluency program. So there's a lot of ways that these technologies can help kids with ADHD, help them with learning, and in turn help them with homework. So here are some ideas and some other tools and strategies for limiting digital play. Okay, so first of all, is digital play good for kids? So in today's world, I would tell you absolutely yes. And what I mean by digital play is playing with video games, being on the internet, doing those kinds of things. A terrific study done by Andrew Shabilsky out of Oxford found that kids who played video games for about an hour a day were psychologically better adjusted than kids who played for 3 hours a day. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Kids who play 3 hours a day might be holed up in their rooms, spending all their time doing that. What was fascinating was that kids who played for an hour a day were actually psychologically healthier than kids who didn't play at all. That made sense to me too. Makes sense because the kids who don't play are probably atypical. The fact of the matter is that about 97% of boys and 91% of girls play video games. That kids between the ages of 8 and 18 are spending 7 hours and 38 minutes a day with digital media. That's from the Kaiser Foundation. You have to believe it. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. So kids who play video games a little bit have something to share with their peers. So that, playing for a little bit makes some sense. You also need to find out what your own sensibilities are, and if it's too much, then you need to find some ways to limit access. NetNanny is one tool. There are many programmable routers where you can limit access right from your cell phone. So if you think your kids are busy playing video games at home and you're on your way home from work, you can shut the internet off right from your cell phone. You see a few other things. Parental controls for consoles. The ESRB guidelines can be very helpful for you. I like to talk about a different approach to this, and the approach that I like to talk about is what I call a play diet. And a play diet is essentially says that kids should have a balance of different kinds of play in their life. That should include digital play, maybe an hour a day, but more importantly than digital play should be physical play, being outdoors, social play, doing stuff with other kids, unstructured play where they're just kind of hanging out with their friends, and creative play. So those kinds of plays become really busy. They become really important. Now, sometimes it's hard to get kids away from that digital play because, especially for parents of kids with ADHD, because they seem content and happy. But they need to do those other things as well. So what do you do to make that happen? I mean, this idea of a play diet sounds great, but it's like, how do you impose it? Well, part of it is if you're setting some limits, but another part of it is making other activities more appealing than video game play. So you have to foster other interests. You've got to take them to karate. You may have to join a gym. You might have to get them on the swim team. You've got to have the energy to invite friends over to do things with them. You need to keep them busy with extracurricular activities at school, being in the band or working on doing plays. You need to help them develop a long-term interest. Maybe that interest isn't about animals and going to the zoo and finding other kinds of things like that, but you have to sort of do that. So one of the other ways that you can kind of limit digital play is through schedules. So you're seeing that on this page now. And there are many different schedules. Probably the most common one that I hear from parents is an hour a day, and it really fits pretty well with the research, believe it or not. So it's a good way to think about this. That's probably good for kids who need structure and can't set their own limits. Another strategy is after your homework is done. Well, for those kids, that's probably good for kids who don't like school, kids who can't transition, those who have multiple interests, and need to get that homework done before they get engaged in those kinds of things. Just like anything else, is probably a an approach that a lot of parents that I would call digital natives, who grew up with digital media, might use. Okay, but that's really best. That's best for high-functioning teens and tweens, kids who are out exercising and engaged in other activities. They have a lot of interest outside of digital media. Never on Weekdays is a schedule that works fairly well for kids who have school issues or who might have some addictive tendencies. And we're not spending any time really talking about that, but that really is an issue, and again, one that's worth looking at. Someplace around 8% of kids have some type of internet gaming addiction, or at least are bordering towards that. Only educational games is probably good for kids who get overly engaged in gameplay and kids who need some more educational opportunities. The only thing about that is it diminishes the type of learning that kids can get from fun games. And kids, for example, kids who are playing a game like Angry Birds can learn planning skills, they can learn flexibility skills. You know, your job as a parent or as an educator or as a clinician, and our job at Learning Works for Kids, is taking that learning that they're doing in the game and making that game-based learning into real-world learning. That's what we try to do. We show you how to do that at Learning Works for Kids. It's very easy to see, and so we don't want to take away from those kinds of things. Although if you play those games, you're only going to get a limited amount of that unless you really work at it, unless you pay attention to that. So what if the only thing your kid wants to do is play Minecraft? What do you do? Okay. So, and by the way, I guess I would say, what if the only thing your kid wants to do is play Minecraft or watch Minecraft videos? It's so funny. In the office now, sometimes parents say to me, well, it's not like my kid's playing Minecraft anymore. He's busy watching these Let's Play videos. And that's partly why we've created probably about nearly 24 of these Minecraft videos that you can find on our Learning Works for Kids website. For the people who are premium members, they get access to all these Minecraft Let's Play videos, and it shows the kids what they're actually learning in the game. Not only how to build a structure or create a greenhouse or do what they want to, or mine for diamonds, but it shows them how, in doing those things, that they're actually using skills that can help them in the real world. But Minecraft happens to be a great game for kids to learn executive functioning skills. You know, planning is required for designing what they want to build, flexibility when they mess up and they need to deconstruct and rebuild things. Focus is important for these projects that take hours and hours. Organization is knowing the materials they need. So my emphasis when I talk about Minecraft is trying to find ways to make it useful. I really encourage parents to play Minecraft with their kids. I encourage them to try to take what they're doing with Minecraft and get the kids to learn coding skills, get them to learn other activities that they can do outside of Minecraft. A lot of kids that I've worked with who play Minecraft have actually gone on to do some computer programming, or they've done some stuff where they'll start playing other games that involve programming, like a game like Scratch, for example, which is really a cool game put out through MIT. So, how do you make games and apps good for homework? How do you do that? Well, one of the first things you do is you play some of these games with your kids. You kind of work with them so that you know what they're doing so you can talk about those games. You might want to put together a group of games so that the child can use games that practice the same kind of skill. One of the things that we've learned about using games and technology and some of the new neurotechnologies that are out there. There are some very cool and interesting neurotechnologies, cognitive working memory training, Achille, play attention. There are a number of cool neurotechnologies now that can help kids with some of these executive function skills, but the best way to use them is to identify the skills that the child needs to have and then find the games and technologies that help them. So you have to find the right game or the right app for the right executive weakness. So that becomes a really important thing to do. But another way that you can make games and apps good for homework is you can get your kids to use technology in a way that's going to help them. I see a lot of kids with ADHD who have terrible handwriting, who their parents tell me one or two things. They can write neatly, but it takes them forever when they write neatly. Or they rush through their stuff and you can't read their writing. Well, that's probably because they have some fine motor issues that go along with many kids with ADHD. Those kids need to learn to use technology. They need to learn to type. They need to learn to use a keyboard and an iPad. They need to learn dictation skills, any of those kinds of skills. So developing that expertise with games and technology can be incredibly powerful for kids with ADHD. Sometimes I think that the most important invention ever made for kids with ADHD And again, they have to use it. Having the smartphone to just play a game that's kind of mindless, or to just text to your friends, well, that's okay. But having a smartphone that helps you with a calendar, that helps you with organizational apps, that helps you play games that improve working memory, can be an incredibly powerful tool for kids with ADHD. So I'm going to summarize here, and I want to make sure that I left some time for questions. I hope I didn't go too fast for you. I tried to go through this a little bit quickly because of all things. So these are some of the tools that we've got available for us. We've got the Learning Works for Kids website. Again, I would really appreciate if you followed us on Twitter, either Learning Works for Kids or myself. Liking us on Facebook is tremendous. I'd be happy to respond to you if you have some specific questions. I'll be answering some questions shortly. And last time we did a webinar, I also took some of those questions, and then Attitude was really nice about taking some of our answers and putting them up on the Attitude website, which was a lot of fun for me and hopefully helpful for a lot of parents. We've also developed some very cool ebooks on today's topic. On Minecraft and learning and ADHD apps and more. Those, again, if you go to the website, those are the kinds of tools that are available for people who subscribe to our premium website. And there's some great stuff there for parents that'll help you to know how to use Minecraft, how to find the best apps for kids with ADHD, and how to use them, most importantly. So that's what I got. I'm going to wait for questions to come up. Do I have you, Stuart? Susan?
Unmuted.
I am here. So we have a number of questions that folks have been submitting as you've been talking. So we'll just work our way through some of them. But before we do, because there've been a number of people who've asked a question about getting a copy of the slides. And just to repeat, on the right-hand side of your screen, in the control panel, you should see a section called Handouts, and where you can download the PDF. If it's not there, the copy of the slides, along with the replay of today's session, is available at the Attitude website, www.attitudemag.com/webinars. So between one of the two places, you should be able to get it. So just want to make sure everyone has. So let's jump right into some of the questions. And there are a bunch of technical questions, and there's ones about process. And I guess there was one question that popped out, which was, Randy, was what about timing if the kids are playing the games after homework and before bedtime? Is there any information or research on about how long before bedtime to turn off the screens and get them away from the video games so that it doesn't interfere with them going to sleep?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know who asked it, but whoever asked it, it's a terrific question. I can vouch for this, actually. I will sometimes, because I'm in the middle of a good book that I'm reading on my iPad, take it with me before I go to bed, and I have a harder time falling asleep than if I'm reading a traditional book. And the data is pretty compelling about it, too. Basically, what we suggest is that kids should be away from screens an hour before bedtime. So, and there's some good research that supports that, and it's not just the video games per se in terms of something being interesting. It's kind of being with screens that are lit up in a way that computers and iPads and consoles are. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. In response to the question about playing the games after your homework is done.
Are you there?
Probably a really good beginning guideline, but every kid and every family is different. It just is. I mean, I actually think that one of the reasons that kids are playing video games more these days is because parents, in their own way, have subtly encouraged kids to play video games. What's happened in today's world is that parents don't let kids go outside. There's no neighborhood play, just going out and finding your friends. It's just far less common than it used to be. There's concerns about safety and security. Sometimes parents are working, both working, so the kids have to be indoors. There's a lot of issues now, so the kids end up doing a lot of their play indoors. And when they're indoors playing, what's more interesting than a video game? So they end up doing that. But if you can get kids to go outdoors, they'll actually do that. So my suggestion, if I could design an ideal way, but again, it varies for every kid. If I could design an ideal way for kids to do stuff like play video games, get homework done, would be they get home, they take a physical break. They're outdoors. They're doing stuff with their friends. They're engaged in riding their bike, or playing football, or kicking a soccer ball around, or playing in a playground. They're doing something like that. They come in, they do their homework, they eat some dinner, they have a chance to play some video games for a while, they have some reading and relaxation time before going to bed. So that would be an ideal schedule. Obviously, that's just one way of looking at it. So I hope that answered that question.
Okay. You talked about the sandbox game, which I guess is, and the question that keeps that's come up a few times is, since those games are designed to be ongoing, and in some cases, I gather from the note someone wrote in, actually penalize people when they stop.
Yeah.
How, any specific comments about how to manage that type of game, or is it, is it to some degree trying to discourage them versus other ones, though I guess in some cases that may be futile.
Well, again, a really interesting question. Sandbox games are games where there's no beginning, there's no end, there's not any specific goals that need to be set. You can sort of set your own agenda. Some of them you can play on your own, some of them you're playing with other people. Minecraft is probably the most popular example of that, but there's lots of other games like that, and they are difficult to kind of extract yourself from. So, for example, in Minecraft, if you're playing in the survival mode, and those parents who have kids who play Minecraft, I'm sure you've heard all about this. At nighttime, things like creepers and other monsters come out, and you've got to find a way to protect yourself. And the kids, they don't want to stop playing until they've protected their stuff. And it's understandable because some of the work that they have will get destroyed. That's why for some of these kids, we'd rather have them play in the creative mode where that doesn't happen. But I think that you have to, be able to still set some limits on those kinds of games with your kids. You have to maybe have that discussion with them. You have to, work with them to recognize that they're only going to be able to play a certain amount of time. But you're right, the kids can get penalized with that. I've written a bunch of things, again, on the website about how to set some specific limits on Minecraft, so I think you'll find some other strategies around dealing with Minecraft and other sandbox games there as well. The thing I would say about this that's probably most important is that your kid needs to actually use some strategic approaches so that they lose less, okay, which actually employs a variety of executive functioning skills. So I encourage parents, when they have this kind of discussion with their kids, to engage in that type of discussion so the kid actually becomes more aware that if I plan this out, then I don't have to worry so much about this. If I can kind of finish this particular project, that this will happen. So they can use those executive functioning skills that they're actually using in the game, and the parents having that discussion with them. So that oftentimes becomes a really great tool for getting the kids to learn about those executive skills they're using in the game.
Great. Someone asked if, and I guess I'm going to sort of adapt the question a little bit. They were asking about examples of studies or reports that they could share with their teen to help demonstrate the benefits and the challenges associated with too much video. And I guess part of the question is, are there specific items on LearningWorks for kids that are articles that would be good to share with an older child? to help them understand directly and not just that the parent says so?
Yeah, that's actually so. One of the things that we've done on LearningWorks for Kids is we've developed a whole kids section, and the kids section has a series of video games that the kids can play on the site. And what happens is before they can play the game on the site, they have to watch a little Let's Play video of what's going to happen in the game that tells them about the skills that they'll be using, whether it's organization planning, whatever executive functioning skills they'll be using in the game. They have to answer a couple of quiz questions, and then they can actually play the game. They sort of unlock the game, but they have to think about it before. There's a video section that has a bunch of great videos, a lot of them about game-based learning, primarily for, like I would say, older kids and teens, tweens. You know, not the videos are probably primarily for kids, I would say maybe 8 or 9 years old and up. But a lot of videos about game-based learning, but also about the dangers of playing too many video games. So there's some great videos. And the third thing that we have, again, these are written for kids. So this is, you know, the videos are for kids, and we have what we call a learn section. So we have a play, a watch, and then the third section is the learn section. The learn section is where I've written short articles that basically say to kids, you know, here's the deal about video games. You know, they can be helpful for you, but you got to do a lot of other things. Other things are more important. And so I've written a bunch of things like that for kids. There are also a series of articles for parents around kind of the pros and cons of video games. You know what I'll do, Stuart, is I'm going to make a note to myself. I will add some of those to the attitude page. So let me just make a note to attitude page. I'm going to add some of those things to the attitude page so parents who are interested in having articles that they can read about, you know, the good and bad or the pros and cons about video games, they'll have that and they can go right to that attitude page. And by the way, on the attitude page are some of the articles. We took a couple of articles that we linked back to the Attitude magazine because there's some great articles on Attitude magazine around homework and using technology that I think are really helpful, so that there's some of those there as well.
Okay, great. That will be super. A couple of other types of questions that keep coming up. One is about multiple children in the household and managing multiple kids on with different screen time limits. Any thoughts about how you do that, or do you make a rule apply to everybody?
Yes, I definitely have some thoughts about that. One of the things that I've written about extensively is sort of developmental guidelines for different age kids based upon, you know, for video games. So it's interesting that you bring that up too, because just recently the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a new kind of report. For the longest time, the American Academy of Pediatrics is, I think they've almost been blind to the fact that kids are spending 7 hours and 38 minutes, as I said earlier, a day with digital media, and basically said that, you know, for the longest time they said that kids under the age of 2 should never see a screen, and that's just, it's not just real. It's just not happening. I mean, they, you know, in the newest report they talk about how 38% of kids under 2 are playing, you know, games on, and or playing different kinds of things on smartphones. So, but clearly, younger kids really should have less access to games, technology, and screens than older kids. So I do think that kids under the age of 2, the only access they should have is when a parent is there, and that should be for brief periods of time, and the parent is sort of monitoring that. It really holds true all the way through preschool and up to age 5 or 6. Again, if people want to look on the LearningWorks for Kids website, I've written a whole series of articles on what I call developmentally appropriate kind of screen time and what kinds of games and technology are good for kids. Kids in the elementary school range, probably that's the time when they want to start being able to play some games that they can at least share with their friends. Not necessarily playing online games, but games that other kids are playing so they can talk about that when they go to school. For older kids, I think having longer limits with technology use makes perfect sense. For teenagers, part of their world now is being on their cell phone and communicating with others. A big part of their world is doing their homework and doing research on the computer. Using apps to create things to really help them with their projects. We have one of my students recently created some videos that we have on the website for using the app Evernote for kids who want to be bookmarking things and putting together articles. So the older kids need to be able to use these technologies to succeed. They need those digital literacy skills if they're going to be successful in today's world. So they need more access and more time. And I think having different rules for different age kids is perfectly fine. We have those for other things, right? I mean, you don't let your 10-year-old stay out till 11 o'clock at night, but you might let your 15 or 16 or 17-year-old stay out that late at a friend's house. So it just makes perfect sense that we would have different rules for these technologies.
Someone asked a very simple but I think interesting question about different types of screen time. Do you have a feeling about the interactive games versus the videos versus just watching TV?
Absolutely, and the research really supports that. If we have to rank order those, TV's at the bottom. TV is essentially, and again, you're talking to a guy who every time the Patriots is on, I sit in front of that TV for 3 hours. Okay, so, but TV is on the bottom of the list in terms of what you really get. It's a much more passive engagement. Video game play is really cognitively engaging. One of the reasons that kids love video games is because they're cognitively complex. Kids don't like easy video games. If you ask a kid, did you like this game because it was easy? The answer is generally no. They want games that are, at the level that they can kind of work at and they can get better at. Great video games are adaptive. They start off at a level that a kid can do or a player can do, and they increasingly get more difficult and more challenging. That's what makes video games so engaging. That's why kids get so immersed in video games. So video games are clearly better. I tend to look at most of the videos that kids are looking at in a more similar fashion to television than I do the games themselves. Now, I would say to you that with any of those kinds of things, that even television, for example, there is incredibly powerful learning opportunities on TV these days. I've seen and actually written about this a few times. It's because it's so funny to me. Kids who love to cook. I see so many kids now who come to my office who love to cook, which is incredibly surprising to me, but they love to cook because they've watched all these cooking shows on television. So it's encouraged an interest. Parents who have an opportunity to sit down and watch the Science Channel, the History Channel with their kids to watch shows like How It Works, it's a wonderful opportunity for discussion, for thinking about things, for enhancing an interest that goes outside of some of those kids who might watch some of those shows on science and mechanics might go out and fix a lawnmower or build their own dirt bike or do things like that. So there's lots of opportunities, but I think that what makes those more passive opportunities into something worthwhile is that when parents or other people get engaged with the kid and kind of talking about that and get the kid to think and go outside of just watching that show passively.
One mother commented that her sons have morning screen time before they go to school. That they get up, they get their stuff done, and they do and wanted to know if you had any thoughts or comments on morning time as opposed to evening time.
That's an interesting question. I'm not a big believer in using screen time as a reward. One of the concerns I have about our issues around technology is that people view digital play or video games as a dessert as opposed to one of the main courses that kids should be having in their play diet. I see it as being one of the main courses, not the main course, but it's one of those. It's a side dish that I think is important, if you will, if I can use that metaphor a little further, for kids. That is important. So if the game time in the morning is being used as a reward simply because get your morning routine done, get all these things done, I have my concerns about that. Although, granted, it can be very effective, and I'm not suggesting that parents don't use it like that sometimes, but simply that it shouldn't solely be seen as that. Now, in terms of a morning activity, I guess there's really, there's nothing that I'm aware of in terms of the research that suggests that playing Minecraft or playing another game for a while in the morning is going to interfere with their learning at school. Again, it's cognitively engaging. It's getting their brain moving. I mean, I think that what I might want to do is if the kids are going to do that, is get them to at least talk a little bit about what they did in the games, to get them to be a little bit more metacognitive. One of the strategies that we talk a lot about in Learning Works for Kids is using a number of strategic teaching principles to take games and make them more what I call digitally nutritious. So we talk about previewing the game. In other words, thinking about the skills that you'll be using in the game. We talk about getting kids to set goals in the game and talk to their parents about those goals. We talk about getting kids to be more metacognitive, so they're stepping back and being more reflective about what they're playing. So there are a number of these kind of strategic teaching principles. And simply said, we talk about them in terms of what we say: detect, reflect, connect. Detecting, so they identify the skills, they reflect, they think about the skills, and then they connect. They think about how the skills they might be using in games and apply it to the real world. If a parent can spend 3 or 4 minutes doing that after kids play games, I'll tell you what, the kids will get an awful lot more from the games and probably actually help them to be a little bit more contemplative when they get to school as well.
Okay, great. We're running out of time, but maybe 1 or 2 more questions. There's a lot of concern and a lot of questions and comments having to do with the concern about true addiction. And I guess the general question would be, how do you tell the difference? What do you do if you think it exists? Or any tips or suggestions?
Well, there's no question about it that it exists. The data, the DSM-5 now has a new category called Internet Gaming Disorder, meaning that psychiatrists and psychologists who put that together are seeing it as the real deal. Some of the symptoms we've written a little bit about on the website, and I encourage people to really do some research, because if a parent is concerned about that, they need to do something about it immediately. But when kids, the addiction qualities are similar to what we see with other things. When the kids are doing this, when the kids are engaged in video games to the exclusion of other activities, when it becomes more important than being with family and friends and doing things, when they're not eating, when this is all they want to do, when their mental health and physical health is deteriorating from this. If we want to look at it in terms of the amount of time spent, that's a little bit difficult to say, but I would say that when kids are not sleeping, they're staying up at night. When we look at the data, we know that playing for 3 or more hours a day is psychologically unhealthy, but don't be concerned if your kid does that sometimes. In fact, one of the things I like to tell parents is that, while we might talk about an hour a day or an hour and a half a day, depending on the kid's age, it really varies. So if you're going away to visit grandma, and grandma lives 4 hours away, and your kids are going to be happier in the back seat with their mobile devices playing video games for 3 or 4 hours, and you're going to be happier in the front seat like that, go for it. Let it happen. On Christmas Day, when they get their new video game and they want to go play that for the rest of the day, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. It's when this stuff is happening on a daily basis, when the child has really kind of lost their interest in other activities and won't do anything. Minecraft can be a pretty compelling game and can certainly pull out some of the addictive qualities. Some of the most recent research on this is fascinating. It suggests that kids who show some signs of addiction towards video games might show those same kind of addictive qualities in other activities as well. So that it seems to be less about the games and more about those kind of addictive qualities in the person. There's been some research done out of South Korea. I attended a workshop recently in Utah about this. And the suggestion was that when we really look at this, because in South Korea and China, there's a lot, in Southeast Asia in general, there seems to be a lot more concern about this video game addiction than there is in the U.S. And what they're seeing there in their research is that it has a lot more to do with addictive qualities in the individual than it has to do with the games themselves. But nonetheless, games can be the place that the kids show that.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Any last thoughts or suggestions for parents, Randy?
Sure. Well, like I said, a lot of the topics that we talked about today, and the bottom link here, learningworksforkids.com, Attitude Magazine, has much longer articles about each of these kinds of things that we've talked about today. I tried to kind of select those, and I'll add some stuff to that too. That's kind of we'll keep that as a live page where I'll add some stuff. What we might do is if people have questions for me, you can send them to me at rkulman@learningworksforkids.com. And what I might do is, if I want to write something, maybe what I'll do is I'll send you back when I write something. I'll put it up on the Attitude site, and you'll be able to see that. And Stuart, last time Susan and I took some of the additional questions and she sent them to me, and I kind of responded to those that way because I know people have a lot of questions about this. They're not in the clear answers. Where one of the things I would say to people is that we're really in the infancy of understanding the impact of these games and technologies on kids. So we want to be careful about how much we use them. At the same time, we're also in the infancy around how helpful they could be, and we have to figure out how to make these games and technologies the most useful tools that they can be for kids, and particularly for kids with learning disabilities, with ADHD, with autism spectrum disorders. These kids really are drawn to these games and technology, and I think that that's how I got into this, because it's like, if these kids love these games and technology so much, how do we make them useful to them? And we're still learning about that. So we're in the process of learning about that. And actually, and if parents have any great ideas about things that they've done, I would love it if you share those with me in an email. That would be fantastic. Some of the best ideas I've ever gotten have been from parents who have found things that work with their kids. So, and I want to thank everybody for listening and being part of this today.
Great. Thank you, Randy. Again, folks, check out the learningworksforkids.com/attitude page. There have been a number of questions asking about the replay. A replay of all of today's session will be available on the Attitude website, www.attitudemag.com/webinars. It will be up later this afternoon, as well as a link to download the slides from there. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We have a whole host of great webcasts coming up in the coming weeks. Next week, we've got Dr. Peter Jensen with advice from parents who get ADHD. On the 21st, we have Michelle Novotny with talking about just diagnosed, how to succeed with adult ADHD. And at the end of the month, a very popular topic is ADHD-friendly nutrition strategies for your child. So we look forward to seeing you then, and thank you all for attending. Bye now.